Anyhow, we're delighted to have you guys, and we're really delighted to have our speaker, Debbie. Debbie Clark has been with us before numerous times, and she is you're the co-owner of Pacific Hearing. Is that right, Deb?
That's right.
Uh-huh.
Jane Baxter has been my business partner, and now there are 4 of us who are owners.
So Pacific Hearing folks are very well known to many in our chapter. We're pretty close, and you guys have a couple of offices not very far away from us. So, and the other thing I'd just like to tell you, for those of you who don't know this, Pacific Hearing has been publishing our hard copies of our newsletters for quite a few years now. And most of the copies go out online, but we do still have some hard copies that we give out to different places. So we're so appreciative of that, and they do this gratis for us. So with that is even more great. We're even more grateful for that as well, Debbie. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So let me just tell you with Debbie's topic, and then Deb, if you could just give us your stats after I've done that, okay? And one other thing I want to say, those of you who are part of our chapter or at least are in Northern California, we're going to be having a short business meeting at the end of Debbie's presentation, which should go for about an hour. Won't be long, but please stick around because we have some business that we'd like to share that's kind of important. Okay. So Debbie's topic today is different hearing losses and technology options for each: conventional over-the-counter hearing aids, lyric, Earlens, Cochlear implants. That's a lot to cover, Deb.
Yes, I know. So we'll see how far I get.
Okay, so it's all yours.
Okay, so I do have a PowerPoint. Originally I thought this was going to be live. So if I can I share my screen? Let's see. Oh, I can.
I gotta make you a co-host here.
It looks like it's allowing me to. So let me just go share. And can you see my slide presentation?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I'm going to start it from the beginning here. Good. All right. So let me move you guys over. So if it looks like I'm not looking at you, it's because my slides are over here on this other side. So, anyway, I think many of you are familiar with Pacific Hearing Service. We have had a long relationship, which we have just loved. Sally, Robert, Bob. We've loved being involved with the Hearing Loss Association for all of these years. So I'm very grateful to have been invited to come and speak with you today. So just in case you don't know who we are, just very quickly, we have 2 offices, one in Menlo Park and one in Los Altos. The Menlo Park office is next to the Dutch Goose. A lot of people know where that is. And the Los Altos office, for people who have been here a long time, may know that it's where the old lumber yard used to be. Okay. And these are our audiologists. You might notice there's not as many as there used to be. And that's because, as I mentioned earlier, there's a nationwide shortage of audiologists. We're actually looking for 2 audiologists right now. Many of you know Peg Lisi. She retired at the beginning of the year. And then we had 2 young audiologists that moved related to their spouses' jobs. And so, sometimes when you have young people, their lives change a lot. And so they've moved away. But we do have this wonderful staff. Ariel and Rachel are the 2 new co-owners. Ariel Fruent is Jane's daughter. You might know that. And Rachel Appleton has been with us for a long time. Then, of course, Jane and myself. Brooke Reguscus and Ashley Schwastik. Oh, and I just realized we have a new audiologist that I have not added. Her name is Ling Zhang. So sorry, I have to add her. We do have a new audiologist in Menlo Park. Becky Dolan is the audiologist for our nonprofit Pacific Hearing Connection, which I'll just mention briefly as we wind things up. Okay. And let me start also by saying, I do sometimes get excited about what I'm talking about. And if at any time I start to talk too fast, please let me know. I'm not offended. It doesn't hurt my feelings. And I know how important it is to not talk too fast. So reminders are, I'm totally fine with, so let me know. So our agenda. So what's the big deal about hearing loss? And some of this, I know I'm speaking to the choir, but we'll just review that. Not all hearing loss is alike. Technology options, no one size fits all, and then a few other little things that I'll add in if we have time, okay? So what's the big deal about hearing loss? We all know that hearing loss leads to isolation, especially untreated hearing loss. Leads to cognitive decline. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that today. We've done other presentations on cognition and hearing, but we do know that there's a strong correlation between cognitive decline and hearing loss. And scientists think the latest theory on that is that it's related to the listening effort, that when you have hearing loss, especially again, untreated hearing loss, that extra listening effort causes you to use cognitive resources for hearing that you should be using for other things. And that may be why there's this correlation between cognitive decline and hearing loss. Good news is that hearing aids seem to do a pretty good job of slowing that down and in some cases reversing it. Family tension, you know, the founder of HLAA, and oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name.
Rocky Stone.
Rocky Stone, of course. He used to say that when a person has a hearing loss, the family has a hearing problem. I'm sure you may have heard that before, but I think that's very true. Depression is there's a higher rate of depression in people with hearing loss. And also there's an impact on income for people who are trying to find jobs. People with hearing loss tend to make less money than people who don't have hearing loss. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting little stat. Okay, so I've started to change the way I talk about hearing loss because in the past, we've always shown you the ear. These are the different parts of the ear. This is where, you know, this kind of hearing loss versus an inner ear hearing loss. And we know so much about the auditory processing changes that happen, especially as we get older. And older means starting at about age 35 or 40. There are changes that happen in the auditory parts of our brain that impact how we hear. And I've had a patient that I've been seeing for years, maybe they're 80 years old. They have a lot of difficulty hearing people who speak fast or processing when there's background noise or at family gatherings. And I've had this conversation with the patient, but then all of a sudden one day the patient comes in with their daughter who's like this, Mom's hearing aids aren't helping. And, you know, they think that I'm some sort of, you know, shyster or something, that I'm not doing a good job treating Mom. And there are so many things that hearing aids can't help, but educating and understanding the impact of these cognitive changes or auditory processing changes can help you address things in a more positive way. So I'm changing up a little bit how I talk about hearing loss. So the first thing I want to talk about is mild hearing loss. So what I hear from people with mild hearing loss is, oh, I can get by. And I could hear okay, it's just that people don't speak clearly enough. You know, if they would just speak clearly, I'd be fine. So here are the things to consider. And I suspect there's probably not anybody in this group, in this category, because people in HLAA tend to be more proactive, but I do hear this a lot. So the first thing that comes to my mind is, why do you only want to get by? You know, a lot of people say, oh, I can get by, but why do you only want to get by if you can make your life a little easier by hearing better? I've already mentioned cognitive decline. Research shows that even people with mild hearing loss, their rate of cognitive decline is twice as fast as that of people who have normal hearing. And again, this is untreated hearing loss that we're talking about. And as I mentioned earlier, research shows that hearing aids can and do help. Okay, so that's mild hearing loss. There's also this kind of interesting category of hearing loss that we're seeing more and more, where people, they come in, they say, they have reports of not hearing well, but they pass their hearing test. And then they're told, oh, you have normal hearing, nothing I can do. So that we do see that more. And so there's this whole category of what we now call hidden hearing loss. People who have hearing complaints, they have difficulty in noise, they have difficulty processing when lots of people are talking. And those people are struggling because they've been turned away over and over and over again and been told, you don't have a problem, but they do have a problem. So we still don't fully understand that, but we believe that one cause of this might be what we call a synaptopathy, which means the little synapses in between the hair cells and the nerve fibers. There's something about that little connection that's damaged. And so that means that the hair cells might even be working fairly well, which means they have a normal hearing test, but the connection between the hair cells and the nerve is damaged. And so they're therefore having difficulty with hearing. The good news is that there has been some research to show that hearing aids can help those people. Those hearing aids need to be programmed in a little bit of a different way. But for some people with hidden hearing loss, hearing aids are helpful. And what we do is we'll loan someone hearing aids. If I have someone who has normal hearing, but hearing complaints, I'll say, let's just try it out. You know, I might charge them a small fee for my time, but I say, you know, let's just find out if hearing aids will help you. And for a lot of those people, it does help. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit more about the processing and talk about what we refer to as attentional control hearing loss, which is the fancy word for I can't hear in a restaurant. The older we get, and again, starting at about age 35 to 40, the more difficulty we have filtering out distractions and being able to focus on what we want to hear. So the classic is a restaurant, but I always tell my patients too, you know, it could be any distraction. Maybe you go to someone's house and their house is cold and you forgot your sweater and you're distracted by the fact that you're cold. That's attention that you can't focus on what you really want to hear. So noise tends to be the biggest problem, but any kind of distraction can impact how you follow a conversation. Next, I want to talk about speed of processing hearing loss. And many of you may have heard me tell this story before, but I'll tell it again. It's something that I learned, or is something that a message that was driven home to me with a particular patient that I had maybe about 10 years ago. And this was an older patient that I had, and she was never happy with her hearing aids. She would come in, Debbie, these hearing aids are terrible. You need to turn them up. I can't hear anything. So I would turn them up. A week later, she would come back in. Debbie, these hearing aids are too loud. I can't stand it. So you have to turn them down. So we would go back and forth and back and forth. And finally, I realized one day that if I talked like this in a normal volume, she heard everything I said. And she was a very extreme case of someone who really had a lot of difficulty processing anything that was rapid. And so this meant a lot of counseling, not only to her, but her family also needed to know that it's not the hearing aids. The hearing aids she did have hearing loss and she needed the hearing aids to make the sound loud enough for her to hear. But in addition to the hearing aids, she needed the people around her to modify the way they speak. And that was just her very specific problem. So that's an extreme example of speed of processing hearing difficulties. Okay, and then next is working memory hearing loss. You know, I have to just stop and say, Bob, you're right under me on the Zoom screen, and I feel like with your background in psychology, you probably have a very deep understanding of all of this, and you could probably expound on some of this. Anyway, I keep looking at Bob and thinking he probably knows this already. Working memory hearing loss. We refer to it as auditory memory hearing loss. And the classic example that I tend to give my patients of this is if I'm telling you a story about Bill and Fred, and you're remembering Bill and Fred in your mind, while you're also trying to track the story. That's an example of working memory or auditory memory, being able to hold things in your mind and track something at the same time. We're just not as good at that as we get older. And the thing that I see in my office that exemplifies this is, again, when my longtime patient comes in with her kids and they say, we're at a family gathering at the dinner table and mom can't follow the conversation. Well, I start asking questions about what does that look like? And, you know, they've got the grandkids and they're blah, 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 you know, rapid fire, talking about things quickly. This person's talking, that person's talking. It is not about mom's hearing in that situation. It is about mom being able to track that situation. And so when the families understand these things, I think it makes a huge, huge difference. And let me just stop right there because I have some other types of hearing loss I want to talk about. But does anybody have any questions about those specific things or anything that I've said so far? Okay, good. I'm going to carry on then. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about what we call unilateral hearing loss or hearing loss in just one ear. Or we also see this where someone might have, oh, I see your hand, Lisa. I'll get to you in just a second. I also see people who have maybe mild hearing loss in one ear and severe to profound hearing loss in the other ear. And it's important to understand that the brain really wants sound from both sides. So sometimes I find that people have the expectation that, you know, if I fix the hearing in this ear, I should be able to hear as well as my friends who have hearing aids in both ears. That's just not, that's not going to be the case, especially in noisy environments. So this problem tends to really be more extreme for people in places like restaurants. Because again, the brain wants that sound from both sides to be able to sort through the noise. And if your brain is only getting the information from one side, it's kind of confusing. And, you know, my husband doesn't mind me using him as an example. He is deaf in one ear. He lost his hearing to mumps when he was a little boy. And he has a mild hearing loss in his other ear. As long as I've known him, he has hated going to restaurants. He just hates going. And so when we go to a restaurant, I say, where do you want to sit? You know, and we always, whenever we make reservations, I always tell I always let them know that we have someone in the party with hearing loss and we need to have a quiet table because we just know that even though his hearing loss in his better ear is only mild, he has a lot of trouble in that environment. Okay, Lisa, what was your question? Oh, you muted yourself again.
It was ironic because as you were talking about if you slow down, it's okay. Someone in the chat said, this is too fast for me.
Oh, I missed that. I couldn't see it. Thank you. So, oh, that's funny. I can't see the chat. So if someone sees that, let me know or raise your hand. And I'll try to slow down a little bit. Susan, did you also have a question? Susan Pfeiffer? Can't hear you.
There,
I
I was
see
trying to
someone's
unmute.
hand. I don't know your name there, but go ahead.
I apologize. I'm cooking while I'm listening, and so I had to come find my mouse to unmute. An obscure question, but it's something I've been dealing with recently. Does hearing loss affect your memory?
Ah, that's a really good question. So the short answer is we don't know, but there is a theory about that. And if you, in case you didn't hear the question, can hearing loss affect your memory? So back to what I was saying earlier about cognitive resources, what scientists think is that when you have hearing loss and you're not treating it, you're not wearing hearing aids, if you're trying to hear someone, you're having to pull cognitive resources from other parts of your brain in order to follow the conversation. You're having to put extra effort into it. And that might be from the frontal lobe area of your brain. And that means we only have so many cognitive resources. So if you're pulling cognitive resources away from other parts of your brain, then it might make it, then you have fewer resources available to, for example, remember what's being said. So that's kind of a shortcut way of explaining it, but that there is some belief and some reason to believe that there is a correlation between hearing loss and memory issues. Okay, so good question. Oh, Sally, did you have a question?
It wasn't a question, but if I could just make one comment. I've been 45 years, I've had a hearing loss. And at the last family gathering we had, when everybody was talking at the same time, I got so upset, I started to cry. I looked at them and they said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "For all these years you've known I have hearing loss and you continue to everybody talk at the same time. That really hurts me. And I'm just going to get up from the table if you keep doing this." And you know, it seemed to get through to them. It was hard for me to say that. I mean, I'd said it in shorter versions before with one or two, but it just was like, it just overwhelmed me. And, you know, I think it really did get through that time. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Sally. That, you know, we get asked questions about that all the time. And it's a tough question because, you know, on the one hand, just like me just now, talking too fast, even though I know I'm not supposed to talk too fast. People have a natural way of interacting, and it's hard to constantly be monitoring yourself. So when you get with a family, and it's hard to self-monitor, but at the same time, it's so important. And you know, I've been exploring this. I don't know if any of you have ever, I'm taking a sidestep here. I don't know if any of you have ever read anything by Joseph Grenny. He wrote a book called Crucial Conversations. And it's about how to address these hurtful kinds of, or loaded kinds of conversations, how to address those in ways that are, that don't create so much tension. And I'm beginning to think that for living with hearing loss, having this crucial conversation skill would make a big difference, because it's hard. It does create tension in families. And Sally, I've heard that story, a variation of that story from so many people over the years. And how do you, with the people that you love, how do you address that? It's hard. So anyway, I think that we need to look to Bob's field of psychology and you know, communication to try to answer some of those questions. Okay, so I'm going to carry on, or else I'm going to find myself running out of time. I want to talk a little bit about severe hearing loss or deafness. Sometimes I run into people who have the idea that their hearing loss is so severe, there's nothing that can be done. I see that less than I used to, but I do still see that. It's important, again, for friends and family to understand that, hearing aids will help someone, and of course, cochlear implants will help someone who has a severe hearing loss, with exceptions. But again, it's so important for family and friends to understand what they can do to help. Things like avoiding noisy places. One-on-one conversations will always be better for someone with more severe hearing loss than group conversations. Slowing down. These people who have this kind of hearing loss may have difficulty with the clarity of words, that the hearing aids make the sound go in, you can hear, but it's just very unclear, jumbled sounding. And it's helpful when I have family members come in, they're always surprised when I say, oh, well, this, so Mrs. Johnson can hear, I can speak at a normal volume, but her ability to understand what I'm saying might only be 20%. And their eyes get big, oh, there's a difference between hearing and understanding, and a difference between hearing and clarity. And of course, as I mentioned, cochlear implants are often an option for people in the severe hearing loss category, even moderately severe. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about technology. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about this, but I just want to give you an idea of some of the things that the manufacturers are doing and thinking about. So of course, there's, there's conventional hearing aids behind the ear, what we call receiver in the ear, which is a smaller version of behind the ear, and has, instead of a tube, it has a wire. Custom hearing aids, which are hearing aids that we make an impression of your ear, send that to the manufacturer, and then they custom make it for you. Then, of course, there's rechargeable versus non-rechargeable options now. And of course, also there's smartphone compatibility, which we didn't have. Gosh, how long have we had it now? I was going to say, which we didn't have 10 years ago, but we might have had it around 10 years ago. Okay, so what are some examples of what the hearing aid manufacturers are doing to address all of these different hearing problems that I described? So all of the manufacturers are working on how does a person hear in a noisy environment. That is the #1 complaint we get. And as an example, Oticon, in their latest technology, which is called the Reel, they actually took millions of recordings, different kinds of recordings, a restaurant, a library, a subway, a wide range of noises, and they brought them back to the lab. And they taught the chip how to discern speech versus noise. And I have to say, I've been very impressed with that technology. Nothing is perfect. I never want to say, oh, it's going to know exactly speech and exactly noise, but it does a pretty darn good job. I've been very impressed with that. I had one recent patient who opted not to get cochlear implants yet because he thought he heard significantly better with the Oticon Reel. So that's one example. Another thing the manufacturers are looking at, and this does come from the brain research, we know that when you have hearing loss, you work harder to follow a conversation. And if the signal coming into your brain is, the closer it is to what your memory is of that signal, or the way it should sound, the less hard you have to work. So an example of how this has been addressed in technology is Resound has now has a hearing aid with the option of a third microphone in the ear. All hearing aids, almost all hearing aids, have 2 microphones on the top, one facing front, one facing behind. But now Resound has one that you can actually have a third microphone in the ear canal. And that helps you with what they call the soundscape. You know, hearing things around you and knowing where they are. And my classic example of that is I had a patient, he had been wearing Resound hearing aids for many years and had been happy with them. And it was time for him to upgrade. So I fit him with these hearing aids with this third microphone. And what he said to me was, you know, Debbie, I was always able to hear the birds with my hearing aids, but now I can tell where the birds are. And that's an example. We don't think of that when we're addressing hearing. And we certainly in early days in my career didn't have it wasn't even an option to think of that, you know. But now the manufacturers are thinking more about how do we make the sound more realistic so that you can tell where things are. Tinnitus, of course, is something that is a complaint that many people with hearing loss have. Tinnitus and hearing loss are very closely correlated. So an example of how manufacturers have addressed that. Widex is one of the manufacturers that we like to go to when people have a big problem with tinnitus. I would say all the manufacturers have something for tinnitus, but Widex, in their natural algorithm, they give you a little more amplification for sounds that are soft. That's just the way they amplify. And so having that extra little boost for soft sounds will often help people with tinnitus. In addition to that, they did a lot of research on something they call Zen tones, which are fractal tones that stimulate the brain with sound and will often help people with tinnitus. So I just got my little 30-minute warning, so let me know if I start to, I think we're doing okay on time. And the last thing I want to talk about before I talk about some of these specialized technologies is the cross or bicross technology. That is for people who have, like my husband, who's deaf in one ear and he has a mild hearing loss in the other ear. On his deaf side, he has what looks like a hearing aid, but it's not. It's just a microphone and a transmitter. And it sends the sound from his bad side around to his better ear. He doesn't always like to wear the cross transmitter. Sometimes he finds it just picks up too much noise. But when we're going out to maybe a dinner party, he'll put me on that side, and he knows that I know, and he will. When I talk to him, he can hear me, but he hears me in his other ear. Okay, so I'll be talking to him on his left side, but he hears me in his right ear. And that's a way to allow people who are deaf on one side to be able to hear something on that side. So instead of him thinking, oh, nobody's talking to me, at least he knows, okay, oh, there is somebody talking to me, but he just hears it in the other ear. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about accessories, but I just want to put it out there. I do find that HLAA people often know about hearing aid accessories, but in case you don't, there are many wireless accessories, wireless microphones that will transmit to your hearing aids, wireless transmitters that you can plug into your TV. So if you have the accessories tend to be for specific situations, but if you have a specific situation where your hearing aids are not helping you, there may be an accessory that will help. So something to talk to your audiologist or your hearing aid dispenser about if you have a specific need. My husband and I have used his wireless microphone when we hike, and that's very handy. I can wear the microphone and he can hear me better. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about over-the-counter hearing aids, and I have a suspicion you've had talks about over-the-counter hearing aids, have you?
Not really.
Oh, you haven't?
At the national level, we did at the national convention, but we haven't had one here specifically in our.
Okay. We did a webinar on it, which I think you can access on our website if you're curious. Because I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but I did want to touch on it. So as you all know, the FDA has now approved over-the-counter hearing aids. These are hearing aids that are sold directly to the consumer. So there's no hearing healthcare provider. These devices do not need approval from the FDA. You do have to be 18 years of age or older. Some of the things that are a little concerning to audiologists is they're for people who have mild to moderate hearing loss, but it's self-identified mild to moderate hearing loss. Okay. And then there's also been a little concern about the fact that they can go so loud, because if you've got a mild hearing loss, is there a danger of programming them yourself and making them too loud? We don't know, but that's a question mark. So our thoughts, pros are, it's more choices, and it's good to have lots of choices. There are a lot of people who can't afford hearing aids. There are a lot of people who don't have access to an audiologist. They live in remote areas or a hearing aid dispenser. So there's a lot of good news here because everybody's more aware and more people have access. Concerns. How do you know if you have mild to moderate hearing loss? I have people who come in and who have, pretty significant hearing loss, and they go, oh, my hearing's fine. I have people who have mild hearing loss and they think they've got a severe hearing loss because of the impact it has on their lives. So this idea of people self-identifying to determine if they're a candidate is a little concerning to audiologists. Time will tell, but we don't know how to track the quality of the different devices. The FDA is not requiring that they have a return policy. So again, time will tell whether or not that's going to be an option. As I mentioned, we're a little concerned about the 120 decibel maximum gain. We're just worried about the guidelines. We spend a lot of time programming hearing aids for people. And if you have a cochlear implant, you know how much time is spent mapping those devices. We take a lot of care, and we have fitting formulas that we use and real ear measurements that we take. And so we're concerned that people will hear better with their over-the-counter hearing aids than without, but they might not be reaching their potential. They might not be hearing as well as they really could be hearing. Then, of course, we also worry about comfort issues and troubleshooting issues. And, I have a friend who she came to me. She said, Debbie, my doctor just suggested that I get over-the-counter hearing aids. So that's what I'm going to do. So she did. She said, I'll tell you how it goes. And I saw her at a social gathering a few weeks later, and she had them on, but they weren't even in her ears correctly. I mean, it was sticking out of her ear, and she had no idea because she didn't have anybody who could show her how to take care of it or how to put it in her ear. So these are the kinds of things that we worry about. I've been doing more work in retirement communities, and I had someone in just last week. She came in with her daughter. Mom's not hearing. Her ears were 100% occluded with wax. Her batteries were dead in her hearing aids, and both hearing aids were completely plugged up with wax. So, a hearing aid is only as good as the maintenance that goes into it. So these are there are pros and cons to anything, right? So these are the concerns we have about over-the-counter. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some very specific technologies. And again, I'm just touching on things. If you want more information, I'm happy to answer questions afterwards or have a conversation later. Lyric is what's called an extended wear hearing aid. It is for people with maybe mild to moderate, maybe moderately severe hearing impairment. The nice thing about it is you do get 24-hour hearing, which you don't get if you have hearing aids, because most people take their hearing aids out at night. But the lyric stays in all the time. So if I have a patient who's wearing the lyric, they come to see me, I put the lyric device in their ear because the audiologist has to put it in. You can see from the picture, the picture's a little misleading. It doesn't go usually quite as deep as that one goes, but it goes close to the eardrum. For most people, it's 100% invisible. You can't see it at all. So it's from a convenience standpoint, it's very nice. That patient will come to see me about every 2 months. They come in, I take the lyric out, and I put a new one in. It's purchased on a subscription basis. There's an annual fee, much more expensive in the long term than a regular hearing aid, because you're paying a few $1,000s every year to wear the lyric device. Downsides, for some people, they get abrasions in their ears, then they can't wear it for a couple of weeks because they've maybe got a little hematoma in their ear or something like that. So, for some people, there are fit and comfort problems. It is an analog device. It is not digital. And so I have some really concerning limitations in terms of how I can program the device. I can't do as much with it. There's no noise management technology. There's not a lot of fine-tuning control. There's a little bit that I can adjust, but there's not much I can do to change the sound quality if you're not happy with the way it sounds. So there is a limitation to it because it's analog. They had to make it analog in order to let it last 2 months on a battery. So, you've got this device that's going 2, sometimes 3 months on one battery. So they had to keep the technology pretty simple. So that's why it is the way it is. For some people, it's great. For my patients with very active lifestyles, they love it. For my patients who are very concerned about the cosmetics, they love it. I also have put it in patients' ears who have a lot of dementia, as long as there's someone who can help them monitor it, because they don't have to worry about changing the batteries and all of that. So if I fit someone with a lyric who has dementia, I want to make sure that there's a caregiver or a family member who's helping to monitor that. Earlens. Earlens is a company that started here in the Bay Area. I suspect you've all heard of it, have maybe gotten mailers from them. They have a very interesting concept. This is Dr. Perkins, Rodney Perkins. Some of you may know him or know of him. He's been quite an innovator in the hearing industry. He was one of the founders of Resound hearing aids. So he came up with this idea of putting a lens on the eardrum and then having a device that sends the sound and stimulates that lens, which in turn stimulates the eardrum. It's a magnetic signal. It's not an acoustic signal. It's very, very different from any other hearing aid that's on the market. So what's the potential advantage of this? Well, the normal hearing person can hear quite a wide range of frequencies or tones, from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. Now, the truth is, most of us don't really hear very well up at 20,000 hertz. It has to be pretty loud in order to hear it at that frequency. Conventional hearing aids, because of the limitations of the microphones and of the receivers, they tend to amplify roughly 500 hertz to maybe 6,000 hertz at best. And engineers have chosen those frequencies because they tend to be the most important for speech understanding, okay? But the Earlens does is it gives you a much broader range of sound. So especially people who are musicians love this because they can hear more. But also their research suggests that it can actually help improve speech clarity. Whoops, I meant to go, let me see if I can go back for just 1 second. Potential downsides, there's a little maintenance that goes along with it. We have had some people that have had some difficulty with the lens slipping on their ear or not fitting quite right. So it's not perfect, but it's a very interesting technology and they seem to keep getting better. Cochlear implants. I am not a cochlear implant expert, but I know the basics. It is really for, okay, at least I see your hand. I had a feeling I might hear from you. So give me a second. Cochlear implants are primarily for people with severe or profound hearing loss. And basically with a cochlear implant, you're replacing the inner ear with electrodes. So they thread electrodes in the inner part of the ear, and then you have an outer processor. It is not a quick fix. There is a process of retraining the brain that goes along with cochlear implants. But I have to say, I've been amazed at how far the cochlear implant technology has come. I had a patient who came in not too long ago. I used to have to be very careful how I spoke to her. And she was standing at the front desk in the office. And I happened to come right up next to her and talk to her in my normal voice. She wasn't even looking at me and she heard everything I said. I could not believe it. So the implant technology is amazing. Lisa, I have a feeling you want to chime in a little bit about Earlens. You're not on.
I know HLA has had presentations about Earlens, so you guys are pretty familiar with it. And a downside is it's not cheap. However, I am now in month 15, I think, of having Earlens, and some surprising things have happened. One friend told me that my diction was better, and I've noticed that I now pronounce T's and K's and F's and much more distinctly than I used to. I never would expect that a hearing aid would affect my speech, but it did. And it seems to me that my brain continues to benefit from it, and it continues to get better. So I used to run them. They give you only 2 programs to start with. They give you Maine and music. And I used to always live in Maine unless I was playing music. Now I live in music all the time because unless I'm in a really noisy car. So I'm hearing everything, almost everything. And my ability to understand speech has drastically improved. So end of commercial.
Oh, that's wonderful. And you know, that goes to, at least I think, being able to hear some of those extra high frequencies that hearing aids can't reach. You know, you can better monitor your own speech, and those T's and K's that you mentioned, they've got a lot of high frequency sound or energy. So that makes sense to me. Okay, I'm going to speed things along here. I'm almost done. As I've already mentioned, the importance of hearing care, I believe, cannot be understated. Hearing aids only make a difference if you and your loved ones, Sally, understand what hearing aids can do and cannot do, or what cochlear implants can do and cannot do. It's a constant management process. They really have to be programmed appropriately for your hearing profile. We sometimes see people who have gotten hearing aids, you know, cheap hearing aids online, or have gotten them from maybe someone who didn't spend a lot of time with them, and we reprogram them using real ear measurement techniques, and they go, oh my gosh, I had no idea how much better I could be hearing. So they need to be programmed correctly. Of course, they need to be working properly. My example of my poor lady who had dead batteries and they were clogged up with wax. I mean, she was walking around with earplugs in her ears, essentially. And going to, you need to be able to take care of them and know how to take care of them. We recommend for having the hearing aids professionally cleaned on a regular basis. Even if you change your little wax guard regularly, debris can get caught in the microphones that are right here in your hairline. Moisture can get trapped in the hearing aids. And so it's a good, in my opinion, it's a good idea every couple of months to have the hearing aids professionally cleaned. And of course, they're only, if you have, you know, ears full of wax, it's going to impact how you hear. Again, just putting in that little plug for how important it is for family members to understand what hearing aids can and cannot do, and to have them in on they should be a part of your hearing loss management team. And then lastly, I know most of you know about the humanitarian work that we do. And so I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but in case you don't know, I just wanted to put out there that Jane is my longtime business partner. We started a local nonprofit in 2016 called Pacific Hearing Connection. And our goal is to help people who live in the Bay Area who can't afford hearing aids. So we do have, oh, there it went. We do have an audiologist who sees those patients. We take donated hearing aids, we take donations, we take volunteers, as Bob can tell you. And our goal is that nobody would go without hearing just because they can't afford hearing aids. We do use a sliding scale to determine how much those people would pay for hearing aids. In addition, we've joined an organization. We go to places like Zambia and Guatemala and around the world, fitting people with hearing aids. And that's just something that feeds our soul a little bit. So we're big believers in giving back and making sure that people can hear even if they can't afford hearing aids. So that's that. That is the end of my presentation. I think I got it all in. I'll stop sharing. And I'm not sure how much, maybe just a few minutes left for questions if there are any.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, I have a question. Thank you for the excellent presentation. I realize that hearing aids improve hearing, but how do we improve the central processing component? It seems like now I have Earlens, which I also agree with that it's been really, really effective for me, but I still have a slow processing. And I've worked with Lyric from, I think it's from UCSF and some other programs like that, but do you have any suggestions for improving central processing?
Oh, I think you might be thinking of LACE.
LACE, okay, LACE.
Yeah,
Maybe
LACE.
that's it, LACE. Got it.
Yeah,
Yes.
so that actually is a whole nother presentation we could do, but there is this whole category of what we call auditory training. LACE is one of them. There's another one that I like that like LACE is also steeped in the research behind it is very good, and it's called Amplify. That's AMPTIFY, Amplify. It used to be called Clear, and they've made some changes, and I think it's better. I always warn people that it's like playing computer games, and so the games are a little cheesy, but they really are steeped in research, and there seems to be some evidence to suggest that they really can make a difference. The other thing is music. There's been some very interesting research on, yay, Lisa, I see your hands going up. There's some fascinating research on musicians and auditory processing. And oh my gosh, I'm going to blank on her name, but there's a researcher at Northwestern who has done a lot of research on musicians and hearing loss. If I think of her name before we sign off, I'll tell you. But anyway, there is some evidence to suggest that playing an instrument, not just listening to music, and even singing isn't quite the same, but playing a musical instrument, practicing at least 3 times a week for like 30 minutes seems to make a difference in your ability to process. So we know that people who are musicians, they just do better in these noisy situations. They have better processing. And we think it's because they're training those nerve fibers to really pay attention to things. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions?
Not a question, Deb, but a comment. I have been surprised how often my ears need to be cleaned. So every time I go in, which is at least once a year and usually oftener, I make the appointment to include a cleaning. Because it's amazing how, we just can't get in there and clean our ears well enough. But
no, it's hard to clean your own ears. That's interesting.
and it makes all the difference in the world. The same, one of the things that I took away from the convention when they were talking about over-the-counter hearing aids was the importance of having your ears cleaned first and then a hearing test to actually determine what your level of hearing loss is. And people somehow forget about that first, have your ears cleaned first piece. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I know. Sally, there have been times that I've had people who came in to see me and they had a hearing test somewhere else. And I look in their ears and their ears are plugged with wax. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how accurate is this hearing test? Because they had wax in their ears and, whoever's testing should look and be sure. But 2 things on that. One is, as we get older, sometimes because of the changes in the cartilage in our ears, it makes it harder for the wax to work its way out naturally. So that's one reason people tend to get a little more wax buildup. But also, when you wear hearing aids, you're constantly pushing the wax back in. So the wax will normally, want to migrate out of your ear, but as you're putting your hearing aids in, you tend to work against that natural progression out. And so that's another reason why people with hearing aids will often have more wax buildup. So I'll look at the chat. I don't know if there's any questions. Okay, I don't see any more questions on the chat. Oh, Susan, you had a question.
Yeah, sorry. I was waiting for my name to be called.
Yeah.
I'm wearing Starkeys. I was part of a study. It's the Starkey just is still doing at Stanford. I was one of the early people in it. And because I made all the appointments, they gave me a free pair. And this was for the edge mode. And I was wearing, trying to think, Oticons, I think before that I didn't like. These I like a lot on some things. I'm still learning the different programs and how to adjust them. But I still have trouble sometimes with people with strong accents. And one person in particular, a good friend, who has cerebral palsy, and she's running an organization now. And I found a lot of events for seniors. A lot of people can understand her. It's difficult, but they can. I can't. And another woman who's a senior, same problem. And I'm wondering if it's because we wear hearing aids that we're hearing the audio, but we're not understanding the speech.
It's a complicated question, and accents after noisy restaurants, accents are probably the second complaint that I hear from people. And basically, as you know, hearing aids improve your hearing tremendously, and the technology is pretty amazing now, but they do not give you normal hearing. So anything that's an unfamiliar speech pattern is going to be an extra challenge. And that's where accents come in, because it's an unfamiliar speech pattern. So, back to what I was saying earlier about crucial conversations and this whole technique of how to address these awkward conversations. I do think that asking people, if you have someone who's difficult for you to understand, just that statement like, because of your accent, it makes it very difficult. Because of my hearing loss, I have a hard time with your accent. Take the blame for yourself. Because of my hearing loss, I have a hard time with your accent. It would help me if you speak a little more slowly.
She was having a family member repeat what she was saying for her. We
Mhm.
call it translating. She
Mhm.
has stopped doing that, but I have found my friend and I are the only two who actually are not being able to understand her.
Mhm.
And I was doing a street fair. I do enrollments for Cover California. So I was tabling at a street fair in San Francisco on Saturday. And someone from the Chinese Community Health Plan came over to talk to me.
Mhm.
Very strong Chinese accent. And I finally just started nodding. I didn't understand most of what she was saying, but it was
Yeah.
easier to just nod. And I felt maybe it was because of the hearing aids.
I would say it's because of the hearing loss and the fact that hearing aids in general just can't solve all problems. I'm curious, it's a thought that occurred to me as you were talking. Have you, like these Otter apps, or even just the Notes app on your phone to translate? I don't know if that would help with someone who has an accent.
They were speaking English.
Well, I know, but you can, are you familiar with the Otter app? It's a captioning app.
No.
I use it sometimes with my patients who have really severe to profound. I actually learned about it from a patient of mine that has profound hearing loss. She uses it in meetings and that sort of thing.
What is it called?
It's Otter, OTTER. And then the other thing that I find handy sometimes when I have a patient here, maybe we've taken their hearing aids away and they can't hear me because we're cleaning them or something. I'll open, if I see if I can just show you. I don't know. I'll open just the notes page on my, you probably can't see this. Just the notes. And if you click on the microphone, let's see if I can start a new one. If you click on the microphone, it'll start talking and saying everything that I'm saying, or so you can read it. So I don't know if something like that, when you're talking to someone who has a difficult speech pattern, if you use an app to translate, a caption app.
It was not a difficult speech pattern for someone in the Chinese community.
No, but it is for you.
Yeah.
It is for you. That's the key, right? Because it's unfamiliar. It's not your normal speech pattern. So I don't know, just a thought, something like a captioning app might help in those hard situations.
And you mentioned Amplify earlier?
Amplify is AMPTIFY.
And what is that again?
Is an auditory training program. It's like little computer games you play in your computer that help to train the auditory portions of your brain.
Okay, thank you. This has
You're
been
welcome.
really informative.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
So I have a question. With the popularity of cochlear implants, do you think more audiologists will become trained in assessing for cochlear implants?
I think already a lot of audiologists are. So for example, here in our office, in the past, we didn't really have the option of working very much with cochlear implants because there's a surgical component, right? So, we're a private audiology practice. We don't have surgeons here, but we've partnered with Stanford, and we have 2 audiologists right now on our staff that are trained to do cochlear implant assessments and can do the programming. We have a 3rd audiologist that's in the process of getting up to speed on that. So I think a lot of private practice audiologists are beginning to be able to offer that services. It wasn't an option in the past.
Right, because a lot of us are bimodal. So I have a CI audiologist for the cochlear implant and another audiologist for the hearing aid.
Right, and that's exactly why we need to, and so we are seeing, I have a couple of patients and I've passed them on to my colleagues here who know more about cochlear implants than I do. So if I have someone who's bimodal like that, we do have audiologists here who can help.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
That's really good to know, Deb, because there are so many people getting cochlear implants that it's harder to get appointments to have your needs met.
Right, and I think that's why Stanford is.
Most of the time,
happy.
we're looking at months out to get an
Yeah.
appointment.
I should say that right now we are only working with Cochlear Corporation. So, and hopefully over time we'll work with more different manufacturers. But right now, Cochlear Corporation is the only one, which is paired with Resound. That's the company that we are working with.
But it is good to know that some audiology practices are doing this now.
Yeah.
Because it is getting more difficult to get an appointment because more people are getting cochlear implants and the staffs are not growing as quickly as they need to.
Yeah,
Just as you said earlier, that audiologists are in demand.
that's right. That's right. All right. I know you guys have a meeting that you're going to work on. Anything else? Any other questions before I let you carry on?
It's okay, go ahead. We don't need a long time for our meeting. So if you're available to stay a little longer and there are more questions, that's fine.
Yeah.
Lisa has her hands up.
Okay, Lisa, what a surprise.
Tell that gal to shut up. I was just gonna say, if you are moved to go get a musical instrument and try what Deb was recommending, do not go out and buy a violin because it will make you insane. People need to start playing violins when they're 5, but you should go out and get a ukulele. Low barrier to entry, lots of fun. You can get a playable ukulele for $30, and you can find ukulele groups and ukulele teachers.
That's a great idea. And the other thing is, most of the research has been done with pianos and unfortunately violins, I think, but you can also get inexpensive keyboards, at Amazon. So even if you don't have a piano, if you're kind of curious about that, you can just get an inexpensive keyboard and play the piano that way. Thank you, Lisa.
Annette has her physical hand up.
I'm not seeing it. I don't see everybody in my view, so.
Oh, Annette Sobey.
Muted.
You're on mute, Annette.
While we're waiting, someone asked me what the name of that auditory training program was, and I put it in the chat. So.
Okay, we see you
Okay,
now.
now
Annette.
can you hear?
Go
Yes.
ahead, Annette. We can see you.
Okay. What's the name of the program when somebody says something and then it writes the information?
Oh, I'll put that in the chat too. It's called Otter, like the animal otter.
Oh, it is OTTER.
Mm-hmm. And I also will often just use on my iPhone, and I'm sure Android phones have a similar, just the notes section, and then I tap on the microphone and it will record what I'm saying. So there's also, just without even doing an app, you can do it that way. But Otter, oh, there's another one. There's actually a few captioning apps right now.
Yeah.
Otter is the one.
Ava.
Ava, thank
Ava.
you. Yes, Ava, I'll write that in. Is another one.
Live transcribe from Google.
And live
Oh,
captions,
okay.
live captions is on the iPhone. It comes with the iPhone. And I am using that. So it's, it's free. I know Otter and Ava do charge. So that's something to consider. Look at all of them.
Yeah, I have a free version of Otter that I'm using. Someone mentioned what the Android phone is. I'll put it in the chat if you can say again what that's called.
Live transcribe.
Live transcribe.
It's already in there.
Okay. Yeah, and you just have to use the microphone feature.
There's a new one from Australia that I have on my iPhone called NAL, letters N, A as an alpha, L, Larry, scribe. And it's free. And it's has a very nice 4-screen thing to teach you what you do to make it go.
That's interesting. Now I have to tell you, NAL, I think stands for the National Acoustics Laboratory, which is in Australia. They've done a lot of research on hearing aid programming and formulas for programming. So that's interesting. I didn't know about that one. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you put that in the chat?
I just did. NAL scribe.
I have a question. I have my iPhone out now and I don't see the microphone on the notes. Where do you find that?
Let me see. So you click on notes and then you act as though you're going to start a new note. I don't know if you can see, but down in the bottom, I'm going to start a new note. And then here in the bottom, there's a little microphone.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
then I can, if I talk.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I find that handy if I just, someone's in the waiting room and they don't have their hearing aids with them. It's very handy to just pull that out and talk to them. Okay.
Thank you. Hello.
Well, Deb, I think we've taken all of your time, that more than your time. So thank you so much. This was so helpful, and I'm thrilled to have you always come and speak to us. So we try to get you guys at least once a year.
Thank you, Sally. Well, we
Usually
love.
somebody from your offices, if not you. So thank you very
Well,
much.
thank you. Well, we love our HLAA friends. So thank you so much for inviting us.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.